Hello LEGO VIPs and welcome to the very first LEGO VIP car meet. So I'm Ginny Buckley, I'm a car journalist, presenter and a massive LEGO fan. And I'm joined here today by three people with very cool jobs. We've got LEGO Design Master Mike Psiaki, Porsche exterior designer Fabian Schmölz, and Jörg Thilow from the Porsche Heritage and Museum. And we're going to talk to you about a very exciting new LEGO set. So welcome to the three of you. Thank you for joining us today. So let's move on to the thing you all want to see, the set. Let me reveal to you, wait for it. Ta-da! It is, of course, the LEGO Porsche 911 Turbo. What an extraordinary set that is. But that's not all, because here behind me, we have a LEGO Porsche 911 Targa. That's right, in this set you can build both of these. So today we're going to be taking a bit of a journey back to the 1970s and 1980s as we discuss LEGO's launch of a set based on a design from the iconic Porsche 911's long and illustrious history. Plus we'll be taking some questions from you, from the fans. So let's get started. And I think, for you guys, for the three of you, what's brilliant for me about this is that it brings together two brands that people know and love, LEGO and Porsche. So how did this collaboration come about? Mike, let's kick off with you over at LEGO HQ.
Thanks, Ginny. I'm here in Billund, Denmark. That's where LEGO is headquartered. And just share a little bit of background on this project. This is something that we started over 2 years ago, working here at LEGO with the idea of building a Porsche 911 in this larger scale with the extra level of details, with the classical LEGO bricks, like everyone remembers from their childhood, much like we've created a classic Porsche. So it's just such a fun project to have gotten off the ground and now have here in our hands, seeing people getting it in the shops, finding it online. It's going to be amazing. But we had a really great collaboration with Porsche on this model. So I want you to also hear from Jörg and from Fabian about their involvement in it and everything we've done together from the LEGO expertise side, but then also bringing in the Porsche expertise to make sure that we got this car done really correctly.
Yeah, Fabian, was there a little kind of fist bump and a whoop in the design centre over at Porsche when you realised that there was the potential for a LEGO collaboration?
Yeah, Jenny, that's for sure. I mean, I guess everybody in the design studio in Weissach at Porsche Development Center, we are all great enthusiasts about LEGO. And I think there are certain similarities between the Porsche brand and LEGO when it comes to timeless philosophies and simplicity. Yeah, all those aspects play together quite well.
And Jörg, again, was this quite an exciting project to be there at the start of?
Yes, of course. I mean, if LEGO is asking us to partner in the development process of a 911 LEGO car, for us it was the main goal to find a good decision in what type of 911 we should do and what generation. Until today, we're talking about 8 generations of 911. So finding the right one and making a decision, I think, was the first big goal we had to do.
Yeah, I've got some questions about this because absolutely, this is a car with such a long history. You know, it goes back to 1963. It's the best-selling sports car of all time, and Porsche fans will argue for days about which variant, which model is their favourite. But before we come on to all those questions about this, what I'd really like, and I think probably the LEGO VIP fans out there would like, is a really good look around this. So Mike, can we hand back to you so you can talk us through the 911 Turbo and of course the 911 Targa and just give us an insight into these two incredible models.
Thanks, Jenny. I am more than happy to do that. This is a model that I've started as a passion project almost 2 years ago now, so I could talk about this thing probably forever. So please stop me when I've gone on too long because I won't know when that is. So this is the 911 Turbo, as you said. This is like a late 70s, early 80s, maybe even all the way through the 80s version of the car. One of the first things you'll notice that makes it stand out as that particular version of the Porsche is this extra wide bumper here that's the bumper in the front, but then that also gets repeated in the back, and then you have these extra blocks and then the kind of crumple zones here and way back here. We worked really closely together with Jörg from the museum at Porsche to make sure that we got all of these details as accurate as we possibly could with our Lego bricks. Of course, that can be a real challenge when we're trying to build something as curvaceous as a 911 out of what people would consider a very blocky medium with Lego bricks. So we had to get pretty technical and pretty clever with a lot of our building techniques and our elements to make sure this car fit together really well. But I think that's actually the perfect thing to do when you're building a Porsche, which is a car that is very technical and very cleverly assembled and turns into something amazing in the end. So I think it's just an incredible matching of brands, what we've done here. Some of my favorite bits in this car, you can see in the front, we have the headlights mounted at a slight angle. This was actually input from one of my coworkers. I was originally attempting to just mount the headlights flat, but so many people came by and looked at what I'd done, and they said, the Porsche, it needs that small tilt on those headlights in order to really look great. So that's a fun little build that goes on inside of here to make this mount in at just a slight angle and then hold in position. One of the other details you'll see, it's a little bit hard to see on the black rim, but we actually include a silver rim as well when you rebuild into the Targa. We have this really nice 5-spoke rim that one just looks great on the car, but it also allows us to have a steering function since it moves the attachment point of the rim out, and we can put a steering inside the rim, much like on a real car, so that we have that steering linked through all the way to the wheel in the cockpit. If you move back, one of the things that was really challenged to capture and something we wanted to make sure we could get right is this fly line, I guess you could say, from the windscreen all the way back to the bumper here that just runs smoothly through. We've achieved that with some clever angle techniques here in the back of the glass house that allow these two bow elements to come together quite seamlessly here and make a really beautiful shape. You can open up the doors, so the driver and passenger doors, to see inside the driver's compartment. We have, again, the steering wheel I already pointed out. It's going to be really hard to see the gear shift and the handbrake, but they're there. And we even have, on a 911, I think it's called a 2+2 configuration. So it's not a 4-seater, it's a 2+2. And you have those two back seats. You can barely see them through the glass here. They'd definitely be cozy to sit in, just like on the real car, but they are there. Then, as we continue towards the back, one of the other important details about the turbo version of the 911 is that we actually have an increased track here on the rear axle. So when you compare, let's see if I can show this. When you compare the front and the rear axle, you actually have a wider rear axle. And this allows for better traction, better control with the extra power added by the turbocharged engine. So we've achieved that by adding an extra element on the outside here to simulate that wider rear bodywork and wider rear fender. We have the iconic spoiler here with the kind of raised engine compartment, which is, again, to make space for the extra hardware needed in the engine compartment to add that extra power from the turbocharger. And then the way that the lights wrap around here with the Porsche badging on the lights and the turbo badging right above that, and then, of course, the license plate. So then I just want to open up here as well, that engine compartment. This right here, this is the most important bit. And this, Jörg helped me out a lot with this. When we were developing the model, I was looking at pictures, and the engine compartment on a 911, especially a turbo 911, there is no wasted space in there. And when you look at pictures, at least when I look at pictures, it was so confusing for me to decode. What am I looking at? What are all these parts? What are they doing? What are the most key bits here that we need to capture in the Lego model? And Jörg, from the museum, he just did an incredible job of not only he would get pictures for me, images of different engines and explaining how all the different parts work, but he would even make drawings on them saying this is where the air is coming in, and this is how it gets into the turbocharger, and then from there into the engine. And that was so helpful. And also just cool to learn how it all works, because I'm not a huge car guy. I know some things, but I definitely learned a lot exactly about what is going on with this 911.
And Mike, there was so much enthusiasm for this project that you didn't just do the turbo, did you? You didn't stop at that. You guys went, hang on a second, let's do two. How did that come about?
So actually, I love the coupe versions of cars, the hard top. I think those ones always look the most beautiful to me, where the lines of the roof get preserved. Some people really love convertibles because they like the idea of taking the top down and going for a Sunday drive or whatever. But for me, I always prefer the hard top version of a car. So when I first built a Porsche, I said it's got to be the hard roof, the turbo. That is the quintessential 911. And so my coworkers came to me and they said, actually, the coolest version of the 911 is the Targa. That's a way better version than the turbo. And I said, Really? Do you really mean that? It started an enormous debate. This was like the most I've ever seen people split at work on what should we do. I would go around asking people, thinking, okay, if I ask this person, then I will finally have consensus. And invariably, they would always respond with the opposite of what I was expecting, and the votes just kept going up and up for each version. Another guy at LEGO, Andy Woodman, who's also done a lot of car designs for us over the years, when I showed him, he said, why don't you just do both? And so that's actually what we've managed to do. I didn't actually think it was possible, but what we've managed to do is create both of those cars in one set. So I don't want to be misleading here. You cannot build both of these cars at once. And obviously that seems a little misleading when I'm holding them both here. But what we've done is we've created an experience where you build about 80% of the car, let's say, and then you come to a page in the instructions where you then need to choose. Do I want to build a turbo or do I want to build a Targa? And then those last, maybe it's 100 steps of the instructions, you're choosing a path. It's kind of like a choose your own adventure story, but there's only one major choice. So yeah, this is the Targa version of the car, which again, equally as iconic as the turbo. We have the large glass window here in the back, and then that iconic Targa bar behind the driver and passenger seats. And so what's cool is all of this buildup is very, very similar. Probably the most complex thing that we had to do to make this transformation possible is in the rear axle. So the entire rear axle structure comes out of the car like this. So you wait until the end, and then either you build, this is the Targa axle with the standard width, or you build the turbo axle, which is just 2 modules wider.
I know that all our VIP fans out there will have loads of questions just about the detailing on this. And, you know, the sets that I've got here, they really are incredible. You know, that steering wheel, you say, that moves, and it's really hard to show you inside. But yes, the gear stick works, you know, the handbrake, it's amazing detail. I think I really liked us to bring in Jörg and Fabian now, because, as I said, this is an iconic car. So I'm a car journalist. I've driven hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of cars. If you had to pin me down for my favourite, it's this car. But which generation? Now that's another question. So Jörg, you talked a little bit about this earlier, but how did you decide that it was got to be this one from the 70s, 80s, this particular generation?
Well, in the end, it was not us to decide what generation of 911 should be done. I think it was finally a decision from LEGO. But in the end, I think this generation, which is the second generation of 911, is perfect because of the exterior parts, which are kind of easily to be done in a LEGO brick. We have curves, of course, but we also have some angles and some squares. And so I think this generation of 911 is prepared to be a LEGO brick set.
And for you, Mike, what was the appeal of this particular generation?
Well, it's exactly what Jörg is saying. The first model we built, we tried to base on a first generation 911. And the biggest difference you'll see right away between the first and second generation is that bumper, like I talked about earlier on. The first generation Porsche has this really thin, beautiful silver bumper. And every time we tried to build that out of our Lego bricks, it just kept looking like the Generation 2 car. So eventually we said, why are we fighting this so much? Why are we trying to make something that our bricks are not meant to recreate? Let's just do the one that they would do a really good job making. We were going back and forth over exactly which car should we do, but that was actually the piece that pushed us very strongly into the camp of let's do the Generation 2 car.
Fabian, I'm really interested from a designer's perspective, and actually then from all of you, that this is, as we keep saying, it's so iconic. You cannot get this wrong. Which were the bits, Fabian, or which were the parts of this build that you thought you were most concerned about, that you thought would be the biggest challenge to replicate in Lego bricks?
Oh, that's a tough one, Ginny. I think you have certain aspects about the design of a Porsche which makes it really unique and iconic. In general, to be a 911, like Michael said already, like it's the fly line, which is really dropping fastly towards the rear and to the engine. And this has a certain dynamic to it. You have to get this line right to define the car and the character of it, which they did. They did a great job. Also, the pronounced wheel arches, like we said, it's curves. And curves is usually something you don't really have in LEGO. But Michael really sorted this out with certain bricks from other models, or also to give it some slight angles. If you look at the Targa, for instance, you also have the three-dimensional glass, which is really iconic piece from this time and really gives us this lifestyle feel from back in the days in the 70s. I think the hardest part, but Michael should tell about it actually, was the shoulder, I guess.
Yeah, Mike, was that the tough bit? Was that the bit that gave you sleepless nights, the shoulder?
I don't know if I would say it was just the shoulder. Yeah.
And Jörg, what about from your perspective? Which were the parts of this build that you were apprehensive about?
In my point of view, the biggest task was to have two-in-one. If you see the cars in detail, you see that the Targa is of course on the same base of 911, but it has different measures, different parts. And so you have to be correct if you want to fulfill the demand of your fans and of our fans, and you have to be correct in terms of details. And so assembling this LEGO 911 means that you also, if you follow the Targa way, you have to be sure that you're really following it. And so not just the width or the height of the car is a thing in original, also some small features in the car itself. I remember Mike and me talking about the Targa roof, for example. So this is something which is very, very special, that he really was able to follow the correct way of the original. And so I want to really thank Mike for doing that, because of finally this is the 100% match with the original car.
So before we move on to questions from our LEGO VIP fans, I'm just really curious to know how this design collaboration practically worked, because we're in extremely challenging times in the world. You can't get together for physical meetings to talk about things. So how long did it take, and how did you manage to work together?
That's a great point, Ginny. We did have a little bit more of an untraditional collaboration from what we've done on our other cars in the past, but I actually think this one, the process on this went really, really incredibly well considering all the circumstances. We were developing this model kind of from February 2020 to the end of April, so about 3 months. There was some early work before that, but that was the really solid, everyone focus on this one task, let's get this done. So kind of very much right in the middle of that process, all of a sudden everyone at LEGO got sent home, and I was working out of my garage, which funnily enough, then this is the first car we've done that's been designed in a garage, which I think is kind of cool. It fits for a car. But the positive side of this was that actually I collaborated so much with Jörg as we made this model, and we would talk sometimes even a couple of times in a week where we would get on a video call with each other. And I would actually just share my screen and share the digital model that I was working on, so I could take that model and turn it around and put things on and take things off all in real time. Normally, when we work with a partner, we go and we meet physically, which is great to get that face-to-face meeting and make that connection and to show a physical thing. But it's really hard then to do loops on that, because now you need to take feedback, bring it back here to Billund, and then work that in, and then show again maybe in pictures or a video. But you create these long feedback loops. So when Jörg and I could just sit there on the computer together, and he could say, the part I remember really clearly is the exhaust pipe. He said it needs to have that angle to it, and I could just bring in different parts and show him, do you want it this many degrees or this many degrees? And he would just pick on the spot, this is the one that matches, and then we would just be done. It was really a new way of working for me that I think turned out really well. I hope Jörg had as much fun as I did.
Yes, I also had much fun doing this. Of course I did. So I'm sitting in Stuttgart, Zuffenhausen, in the museum, and of course we have a lot of Porsche 911s out of this generation. This car has been built roughly about for 15 years, and so we have different kind of 911s from that time. And so all I know is the genuine parts and the real cars which are standing around me. And so Mike was the one who has had the bricks, and so we had to come together, but not sharing the physical things or sharing the information close to the object or subject. It was just digital. And so every one of us came with his mind and his knowledge, and we put it together digitally. And I think this was I didn't expect that it went so well, but it did.
But I still think when all this is over, Mike, you've got to go over there and see the cars for yourself and say hello and go and look at that heritage museum.
Yeah, I'm so excited to get to make a trip down to Stuttgart and see everything there. We haven't been able to work it out yet, but I'm sure one day we'll get a little bit more freedom to travel, and I'm ready to go.
Brilliant. Now, I'm going to move on to some of the fan questions now because we've got lots of them in. So we've got some questions from Hispabrick magazine, and I've got to ask this one first of all. Are there any Easter eggs in the models? So we all know what Easter eggs are, those little hidden gems. Come on, tell all, Mike.
Is that really a question from them, or is that just you trying to get me to say?
No, nothing to do with me at all. It is genuinely a question from Hispabrick, although I would like to ask it too.
There are a few Easter eggs. There's some actually that Jörg put in. There's some that I put in. Some of them are more obvious than others, but I will not reveal anything. Otherwise, it removes I don't want to spoil them. It removes the joy of discovery. So.
Oh no, you can tell me. I won't tell anybody.
If you call one out and guess it right, I'm happy to acknowledge that it's correct, but I will not say a thing.
That's a bit mean. Jörg, come on, you can tell me. There's no bit. We'll just keep it between us. We won't tell anyone.
I'm not able to, I'm sorry.
I made him sign a contract.
Fabian, do you know? Come on.
I'm not supposed to say that, sorry. Otherwise the doors for Billund are closed forever for me.
Okay, let's move on then from the Easter eggs. Let's go on to another question. And actually, it's a question for you, Fabian. It's a design question. Is what was your favourite gimmick in this model? So I guess what's your favourite sort of element of it as it's been recreated in LEGO?
That's really a tough question. Also, because you have the two models, first you would have to decide which model you prefer more. To me, as I mentioned, I think the Targa 3D glass with Targa bar is so iconic and such an iconic feature from that particular time, also related to the 70s, and which we also try to recreate and honor in our new models. So this is really one particular part I like about this one. I mean, also with the little detail, putting the sunroof in the front, this is so important, and this is part of the car and of the lifestyle it had back in the days. If it comes to the turbo, I would say it's the turbo spoiler for sure. It's the wide track, the power it suggerates. It's it's just that. Yeah.
Beautiful, absolutely stunning. Okay, let's stick with the Hispabrick magazine questions. Another question for the Porsche team, and I guess for both you, Jörg, and for Fabian as well. How would you define the essence of this car, of the turbo, and then how do you define the essence of the Targa? Because they have very different characteristics, don't they? Jörg, why don't you kick off with that one, and then Fabian, you can pick up.
We have to see what's the customer demand, and I think that time our customers had the opportunity to decide whether they want to go with the more sporty kind of 911 car, the turbo, or do they want to go more with the beauty, which is the Targa. And having the chance to sell a variety of cars, I think was very important in that time. And when we're talking about the essence, as I said, sporty or more elegant beauty, not saying that the turbo is not beauty, but it's a more sporty version. I think this is a big clue when we start talking about the essence of a car. And another essence for me is, but this is what I then hand over to the designer, of course, is the Targa bar itself. If you're facing a problem which says we have some safety regulations for having the car in the US market that time, and finding a solution to make a beautiful car out of a safety restriction, I think this is a big plus in terms of the design aspects. And so the essence of the Targa is, of course, bringing something which is a regulation, a safety task into a beautiful type of 911. So, and now I hand it over to the designer. Of course, he can follow up.
I can just agree. It's literally a question of the extremes. On the one hand, you have the sportiness of the turbo. It's like a wide track, more power, more muscular. Also on the wheel arches, the sculpture is way more provocative. And on the other hand, you have the Targa, which is a bit more settled, and like it kind of like a bit more taking himself back in a day-to-day use. So yeah, it's more like a question of the customer, I guess.
Okay, well, let's move on to some questions from Racing Brick now. So, Mike, really interesting question. Why this colour for the set? So, Racing Brick pointing out there are already multiple white LEGO Porsche releases, and some of those Porsche colours from around this era are just incredible. So, why this decision to stick to white again for this particular set?
I was hoping to see this kind of discussion come up when we bring this model out, and it's the reason it's fun to me is we had the exact same discussion all through the development of the model. Like I said, everyone had an opinion on whether it should be a turbo or whether it should be a Targa. Then the next level was, what color should it be? And everyone had an opinion on that as well. We tried some colors that would look great for a turbo. We tried some colors that would look great for a Targa, but we wanted a color that would work great for both versions of this car. So that's how we ended up with white, because it's such an iconic color for Porsche, and it works so well for both of these versions of the car. We thought, let's stay with something classic. Even though maybe we could have gone with a really sporty color like red, we thought that could work great for a turbo. But when we build a red Targa, it feels a little bit like a mismatch of styles when we have this really kind of much more recreational version of the car, but then we have it in this really aggressive color scheme. So that was a big part of the reason why we ended up going with the white car. Another thing is that we talked about these silver bumpers. With the first generation of the Targa, it also had the silver Targa bar, but this second generation, and this is again a reason why we chose this generation of car, a lot of those details on the car, like the accents on the bumper, the Targa bar, the grills over the engine cover, those switched to black. And because we wanted to highlight these things, especially that Targa bar, which the guys were describing how important of a design feature that was when it first appeared, we thought if we make the car white, obviously that's going to stand out really, really well. And it's the same with the details like the spoiler on the turbo. So overall, considering all these different factors, we thought white is just going to be the most amazing thing we can do for this car. And I just think it looks so great. I love the way all of the details just pop on this car.
I think it would have looked fantastic in any colour, but I agree. I think it really stands out in this white. It gives it such a pop. And yeah, what about the interior? Because that interior is such a fantastic contrast. Is that a classic colour for Porsche?
Well, seeing the 70s and the 80s, you can say that it changed a bit. The color charts during that time changed also, and also the demand of the customers, of course, and what Porsche made out of it. And so what we see is that in the 70s, for example, we had some beautiful darker colors with some metallic effect, as the car which is seen behind me. And we had also an evolution in the color charts for the interior colors, like the cotton and the leather things. And I think seeing this interior you have on the LEGO car is very typical for the late 70s. So it's not just beautiful, it's also very typical. And I totally agree with Mike that the white color of the car, the exterior color, is beautiful in combination with the black elements of the exterior part. So totally, it's a beautiful LEGO car, and in my point of view, also it would be a nice original fit.
Mike, is this a standard brick colour, the interior, or is this a bespoke colour that you've designed?
So there's the two different colors. We have the dominant color, I think we call it dark orange, and then the nougat, which is kind of on the inside of the seats. So both of those colors, the dark orange I think has existed for a bit longer than the nougat, but they're standard colors that you can find them in a lot of different sets. There are a couple parts that we're introducing in those colors for the first time here, some of the different slopes and bow elements to get all the right shapes, but it's a color you can find all over the place in the LEGO portfolio.
I mean, the LEGO bricks, there's so many familiar ones. Are there any new ones on here that have been designed for this car?
We developed 3 new elements when we designed this model. You can see 2 of them here on the Targa, so it's a little bit, you could argue whether they count as 2 or 1, but it's because it's this left and this right bow that complete this shoulder line that runs from the headlight all the way through the car. And we tried so many ways of building this from existing elements, but they all either ran too straight through the back and didn't come down enough, or they broke this shoulder that you can see when you see it from the front here. that just can run all the way through the car. And so the piece we've created is actually really it's a unique shape in that it has a different curve at the top as it does at the bottom, so that it matches the shoulder at the top, but then when you come down to the tail light, it matches up with the tail light. So you have a different radius at the top than you do at the bottom. It's a really fun part to build with, and I'm excited for people to not only see how it ties everything together so nicely in this car, but then hopefully get their hands on some and just start making their own creations using those pieces. And then, sorry, there's one last part, and this is a part that came quite late in the development of the model, is actually this 5x5 curve. It's actually kind of a relative to an element that we developed when we made our Volkswagen Beetle in 2016, which to me was kind of poetic, since the Beetle and the 911 have kind of a similar related heritage. If you see the 911 as being the much sportier, aggressive car, this piece is a much sportier, aggressive version of a piece that we developed for the Beetle. So this piece was actually developed specifically so that we could build these two versions of the car. We could build the turbo with that wide rear axle, and then the Targa with the front and back axle at the same width.
Right, I've got a really interesting question here about scale. So from History Brick magazine again, curious to know what set the scale for this model. Was there a specific element or a shape or some combined elements that define the scale? How did you work that?
Whenever we do one of these cars, whenever I do one of the cars, the thing that I always start with is the wheel. We only have so many different sizes of wheels in the LEGO system. It may seem like a lot, but when you start to look at them, there's a rule that every time you go up a wheel size, the diameter increases by 2 plates, which, if you want to get really nerdy, is about 6.5 millimeters. And I won't say the real number, that's secret. So you can very quickly narrow down the scale of the car just looking at wheels. And to me, this was the best wheel that we've had. We've used this wheel in a number of our other cars. We used it we used the same tire size in our Ford Mustang, in our Ecto 1.
Is it in the DB5 as well, I think?
DB5, that's right. So we thought that was a good place to start from. The other thing with this car, though, is I was actually looking at the headlights. Because this is such an iconic feature of the 911, I wanted to make sure that we could really capture those round headlights set at the angle. And so looking at different scales, this one allowed us to have a 3-module wide headlight, which we then had some really great elements to capture that in a beautiful way here.
Oh my, it's absolutely brilliant having the three of you on here, and quite frankly I could carry on for the whole of today, but sadly we are running out of time. But I have a really quick question for each of you before I wrap this up. Turbo or Targa, you have to choose. Which one will you make? Come on, Mike, which one first?
Okay, I'm going off script. I'm sorry. Those are the ones we include the instructions for. But if you're really, really clever, then you can maybe combine a little bit of bricks from your house, and you can actually build a turbo Targa, which was a real car. And this is my favorite. This thing is awesome. So this car has that wide rear axle of the turbo. It has the Targa bar. Then it has the extended engine cover with the spoiler, with that turbo engine inside. And there are no instructions for this car. I cannot say that enough times. We don't include the instructions on how to build this, but you can definitely figure it out if you're clever enough. And this is my favorite version of the car.
I cannot wait to see the shots that you all post of those on Instagram. This is the challenge to you from Mike. Okay, so Jörg and Fabian, come on. Which of these two are you building first? Fabian.
I'm gonna do the same as Michael. To be honest, take the best of both worlds and bring it together. I take the Turbo Targa.
And Jörg, are you having both as well?
It's very hard to decide, but I'm very nervous to see the turbo spoiler. So I would first build the turbo car.
Now, whichever one of these two you would like to kick off with first, one thing is certain. If you're a Porsche fan and a LEGO fan, you're in for a real treat with this set. It's absolutely incredible. So let's give you the stats. There are an incredible 1,458 pieces. The height is 10.8 centimeters. Width is 16 centimeters. And the depth is 35.5 centimeters. And as you can see, you have not one, but two building options, which is very exciting. Decisions, hey everyone. So you can build the LEGO Porsche 911 Turbo or the LEGO Porsche 911 Targa. You can only build one at a time, but then you can have the fun of taking it to pieces and rebuilding the other one. I mean, the attention to detail on these models is absolutely fantastic. So you've got a 2+2 interior with sculpted sports seats, finished in a really striking dark orange and nougat colour, which are based on contemporary Porsche colour schemes. The interior, just again, as I've said, look, you've got the tilting seats. Let me just show you this with the door closed. Look at that. The steering wheel, it's functional, it works. And right in here, which is quite hard to show you, you've got handbrake and also there the gear stick. I mean, it's really a very, very beautiful set, and it does this classic, iconic model, the Porsche 911, absolute justice. Thank you so much for joining us, Mike, Fabian and Jörg, to discuss the incredible design process of the LEGO Porsche 911 Turbo and 911 Targa set. And don't forget, if you want to get your hands on this, VIP early access starts on the 16th of Feb. Now, for the first lucky owners, there is this. It is a limited edition LEGO Porsche Owners Pack, and it contains some fantastic little things, highly collectible printed versions of Porsche's iconic adverts from the era. There is a collector's wallet and also a certificate of ownership. Now you can also visit lego.com or visit LEGO stores where COVID restrictions do allow to get your hands on this exclusive and very special set from the 1st of March. But for now, from all of us, goodbye and happy building.